So it's that time of year again in Southern California, at least, where I start planting my spring garden. Now I kind of get a jump start. I get my seeds all prepared. I put them under grow lights in the house. So the first day of spring, I'm ready to put everything out in the garden. So let's take a look at the garden and see what we're going to have to do over the next 30 days to get this prepped. So last year I did buy the paint and I painted the inside of my fence, but I realized I'm really going to have to give the outside of my garden fence a little paint. So I'm probably going to work on that this weekend. Let's go inside and see how our beds look. So we have received a lot of rain, and I just want to see how the ground looks. So of course we're going to have to add some manure, some compost, some different types of things. But the ground overall looks really good. It's nice and soft. It does have a few weeds here and there, but we're going to pull those. I've actually got some little tomato plants coming up in this little container. A few weeds, so I got to clean all this out. This was some garlic that I had planted that didn't do real well in the fall, but it seems to be taking off now, maybe from all the rain. Not quite sure, but so I'm gonna have to get working on these. I do see a few things of lettuce over there amongst the weeds that are trying to poke their way through. So I think the one thing that surprised me more than anything was that I had planted some, I believe these were beans over here on this little trellis, and lo and behold, over the winter of all things, I had tomatoes start growing. So I'm just going to kind of leave this. It looks like it's one or two plants, but I've got several tomatoes that have gone onto the vine. So I'm going to see in the spring if those turn ripe early. That would be great to get some little yellow or cherry tomatoes early. So we're going to leave this one as it is. So one of the first things that I do every year after I evaluate my garden is I go through my existing seeds. Now I keep my seeds in one of these photo storage boxes. I'm going to list this in my Amazon store. I've never had anything work so good. I go ahead and I just label what each box is. Like these are root vegetables. I've got cucumbers, peppers. Anyway, I have all these different seeds. Sometimes they're from the last year. Sometimes they're things I've already started buying. But I keep all of my existing peppers and I kind of do an inventory of what I like to grow every year. I do save my seeds. You know, there are so many ways that you can save money on seeds. And one of the best with peppers and tomatoes is just to save the seeds you have. And so I've got all kinds of peppers in here. So I'm going to look through, see what I have on each of my boxes. And then that will save me money on not having to buy certain things this year. So after I do an inventory of my seeds, I actually make out a little chart. This is just on an 8x11 piece of paper. I kind of draw out my garden. Now I've got 6 boxes that go lengthwise in my garden, and then I've got 2 extra boxes over here. I take an inventory, I write down all the things that I want to plant this year, flowers, tomatoes, all kinds of stuff. These are my favorite things that I plant, and I'd say probably 60% of my garden is tomatoes and peppers. So that takes up at least like 4 boxes. It's just a big part of my garden. I do a lot of canning for sauces and salsas and things that I use all year long. It saves me a ton of money. And so I do a lot of different kinds of tomatoes. So in this garden, I'm actually going to be planting some peas out probably the 1st of February. I put down March, but I'm going to start in February because they're done. After a couple of months, I'll have tons of peas, and I'm going to freeze some of them. I'm going to vacuum seal them, and of course eat as many as I can fresh. But I'm going to do this whole bed in peas before I start my spring garden. It'll be all done when I plant out. And so right now I'm just kind of thinking of what I want to do. I'm going to think of where I planted last year, and I'm going to plant someplace different so that, it just keeps my garden always moving. So let me show you what I'm thinking, and then I'll bring you right back. Another tool that I use is called this Clyde's Garden Planner. So basically it tells you for your area when is the best time to plant out based on the first frost, that kind of thing. So I'm going to be starting my spinach and my turnips actually in February. Everything else, as far as some of my late winter vegetables or early spring vegetables, will go out the 1st of March. And then most of my tomatoes, peppers, things like that, squash, they're actually not going to go out until maybe mid-April or the 1st of May. It'll really depend on when I have my first frost. So this is super helpful, and I use it every year. So this is the plan I have in place. I've got several boxes that I'm going to be planting tomatoes. So I've got beans that I always do on my trellises. It's just a great way with the stringless pole beans to get them completely out of the garden. It just gives you tons of growing space, and they kind of grow over my walkway here. I also plant my sugar pie pumpkins, or sometimes I plant some of my spaghetti squash over the trellis. So I've got 3 trellises that I've got some good area to do stuff with. Then I've got peppers and onions. I've got bush beans that I'm growing. All my root vegetables are going to be in one box. Then I've got some flowers, spinach, lettuce, and some rhubarb. I'm putting some rhubarb and my zucchinis and my crooknecks all on the edges of my boxes. And this way I just find I have a lot more growing space. I can kind of plant them so that they're going out on the outside of the box, and even on the inside. Sometimes I'll cut the leaves off and I will just kind of force them to grow out so I have more room in the box to grow. So I typically buy my seeds on Baker Creek. I just love a lot of their heirloom seeds, but I'll be honest with you, I look for inexpensive seeds anywhere I can get them. So I oftentimes will buy them at the Dollar Tree. They usually sell 4 packets for $1, something like that. And those are great for things like herbs and cucumbers and all kinds of things. But I always pick up at least 10 little packets of seeds from the Dollar Tree. I've bought seeds off of Amazon. I love those packages where they come sealed in a foil packet with like 10 different kinds of greens. I've done those many times. They're somewhat inexpensive and you get a really good variety of things. I love the Seed Savers Exchange, and I've bought from a lot of different companies, Johnny's Seeds, but Baker Creek I think is my #1. And you buy a certain amount of seeds, they'll send you a free packet of some kind of seed, some kind of surprise. And then what I really like is they always have free shipping. So the seeds are a little bit more expensive, but I think it all evens out in the end. And of course, there's a huge array of seeds that you can buy at any of your Home Depots, your, Lowe's, and of course, any of your Tractor Supply. They actually have a huge selection of seeds, at least the one by my house. So I hope that inspires you and gives you some ideas. If you've got a garden, use it. There's so many ways that you can extend your harvest if you want to garden all year or just the spring and the summer. I do a lot of canning and preserving, dehydrating, freezing. So a lot of my food that I grow in the summer, we eat all year long. And I'm not kidding. It saves me hundreds and hundreds of dollars. Even if you've got a small area where you've got boxes or maybe even pots that you can grow, there's so many things you can grow in small areas now. And they've designed seeds from plants that they've tried over time that can grow in boxes in small areas. So give it a try. Give gardening a try. If you're not somebody that's done a lot of this, I'm actually going to be doing some videos from start to finish. I do every year because it's one of my biggest hobbies. And like I said, I'm actually going to be buying my seeds, all the rest of them, over the next couple of days. I've got an area in my laundry room that's got just those inexpensive lights, the garage lights that you get for You know, they're the lumen lights, I think 5,000 lumens, something like that. I get them when they go on sale at Tractor Supply. So my whole setup cost me like 20 bucks. So anyway, I get all my seeds started early and give myself a really good jump start, and it works out great every single year. So thanks for joining me today. If you're not a subscriber, please consider subscribing to my channel. Give me a like, a thumbs up, or ring that bell for future notifications, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.